Hello, welcome to our Bold Talk. Welcome to, if I'm not mistaken, the 7th or 6th episode this year. I have two bold minds with me. We're probably going to wait about 2 minutes before we officially start. Just so that we make sure we have everyone in the room with us. But maybe before we can use this next 2 minutes for me to explain a little bit about the different things that you can do on AirMeet. So we have, a different types of things that we can do today. So we're going to start the session off with a 40-minute about talk between Torsten and Christian, our two speakers today. And towards the end of the session, everyone will be able to ask questions. So we're very, very excited about that. And yeah, I see we have about 9 people in the room now. Mm-hmm. Good. We'll just leave maybe about 20 more seconds and then we can start officially. I see people coming in, so it's good.
Can Stephanie check the stream? Because there's nothing arriving yet, unfortunately.
Okay, then I would like to officially start this Bold Talk. So welcome to all of our listeners today. If this is your first Bold Talk, welcome to not just this Bold Talk, but to the entire series. If you are someone who is coming back and listening for a second, third, fourth, or maybe sixth episode, welcome again. We really enjoy having you guys with us. Maybe just a short introduction. My name is Carolyn and I'm from the Bold community. The Bold community is a global innovations community based out of Vienna, Austria, actually from the Federal Chamber of Commerce. And we are a global network of pioneers from all over the world, pioneering different things from policy making to business to the creative industries and research and design. Some of our bold minds are working on the big topic of space, which is why we have these two gentlemen here with us today, who I will introduce and who you will get to know a little bit better. Bold Talks is currently our only format where we have you guys or all of our listeners come in real time and who are able to ask questions to the people who are working with, a specific technology or a specific groundbreaking thing. And so we're very, very honored to have these two people with us today. I would like to introduce Torsten Kriening. So he is the CEO and publisher of SpaceWatch.Global, which if I'm not mistaken, one of the leading space news platforms or providers in the world right now. And we have Dr. Christian Schmierer, who is also the co-CEO and founder of HyImpulse. And these two men are going to be talking about European rockets in space today and the interesting things that they're working on. So with that being said, I would like to pass the floor to the both of you.
Thank you. So, and welcome. And please take your seats in our virtual Bold Talk today. So I would like to thank, first of all, the Bold community, first and foremost, Caroline, for the invitation. And not just that, they gave me the freedom to choose my guest for a topic that is very exciting for everyone. And I hope we got the right one. So dinosaurs and space, everyone loves them and has an opinion about that. So question, why did the dinosaurs become extinct? Sure, they did not have a space program. I know it's old, but it's always an icebreaker. I'm Torsten, the publisher at SpaceWatch.Global, Europe-based, and thanks for the nice words, Caroline. We are an independent online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. We are producing daily and weekly newsletters, a special newsletter even on space communication called Nobody Cares About Your Satellite. We produce Space Cafe videos from top space events, Space Cafe radio and podcast. And the Space Cafe podcast is created by another bold mind, Markus Moslechner from Vienna. And there's much, much more. So summary, we have a lot of cool stuff on our website, not just for space nerds. And it's for all of you to explore our website at SpaceWatch.Global. That's as easy as it can go. On that note, in 2 days, on Thursday, the 2nd of May at 4 p.m. European time, we host a Space Cafe Geopolitics, 33 minutes with Dr. Jessica West on nukes in space due to the latest UN Security Council veto of Russia on that topic last week. So it's very concerning for all of us. And so we decided to go for this talk. So today we are here to talk 40-ish minutes about the rockets. And my guest is Dr. Christian Schmierer. And he was introduced already. He's a co-CEO and co-founder of HyImpulse technology. And we reach Christian in Australia. So it's early morning already. So it's thank you very much for this commitment. So we planned the last days with or without Christian, as he is currently on a launch campaign. So please update us on this current launch attempt and what does a launch campaign mean for people that are not familiar with that.
Thank you, Torsten. Yes, I'm currently here in Australia, in the middle of nowhere, so to say, in a little village or town at the coast in South Australia called Seduna. And we are here not for Seduna or the fish or the sea, but we're here for a rocket site. Here's one of Australia's first rocket test ranges called Coonibah Test Range, where we are going to launch our suborbital rocket in this week. Our suborbital rocket is our first product as a company. We are a new space startup and we are working on innovative propulsion solutions for rockets. And this is our first really important milestone, a launch. That's also something that is, of course, very challenging, from the logistics to the technology to the human factors, the cooperation with different companies and entities. And so we're really excited that the launch is scheduled currently for Thursday morning here, which means it's about midnight, Wednesday to Thursday in Europe. And everything looks good. Currently, everyone is already asleep since a few hours because we will do another test run of the countdown to tomorrow morning. So everyone else except me has to get up in 2 hours again and go to the launch site and start the operations. And I'm allowed to come in a bit later.
Great. Thank you very much for that first round up. To all of you that are listening, if we use abbreviations you don't know, please let us know. Throw a stone to us or make some noises. I don't know how that works. I think on the chat you can put questions in. So even if there are questions about abbreviations, please let us know. So we are used to that, but we want to make it as transparent as possible. So Christian, Australia sounds fantastic. And as you said, and you're not there for the fish, but why Australia to launch from? So, and how did the rocket that you are about to launch traveled over?
So we wanted to launch the rocket as soon as possible. When we searched for launch sites a few years ago, we wanted to find a launch site that is like a startup, just like us. The possibility to call the CEO anytime of the launch site and to be flexible at meeting each other's needs. That was the key selection criteria for us. And we found 2 launch sites back then to work with. One is here in Australia called Southern Launch, and one was Saxaford in Shetland in the UK. We're still working with both, and we actually have a launch license for both states, and we wanted to launch in Shetland until end of last year, and then we had to decide to come here because the infrastructure here was ready, while it was not yet ready in Saxaford. And so basically this is well prepared since many years. We have been working with the Australian authorities as well as the UK authorities. We have worked with both launch site operators and are now ready to basically launch in both countries. And the rocket, which is our first suborbital rocket using candle wax propulsion system, which we probably will discuss later in more detail, it will move, or it has moved from Germany to Australia within the last 2 months. So actually end of January, we shipped it and it arrived here early April. And the funny thing or the interesting thing is that our rocket is already fueled during the transport because the candle wax is already inside the engine, but we did not have to do any special precautions. We did not have to charter a special transport or even get any explosive license or anything like that because the candle wax is safe and inert. And so we were able to transport a fully fueled rocket on a regular container ship without any special measurements. And this shows already that our technology is really flexible. We can move to a lot of launch sites around the world. And that's one of the reasons why we're working on it.
Hold on a second here. You put your prepared rocket on a ship. I heard the words are of saying that, but can you explain? I mean, did you put it in normal freight container, or did you it's in one piece, right? So how does that fit? I mean, if you go to a container ship and say, hey, I want to move my rocket with you guys, I mean, I think that there's challenges with that involved as well, right?
Yeah, that's true. So actually, of course, in the beginning, the companies that we're working with, they're always a little bit surprised that we come to them as a regular service company and ask to ship rockets. But in the end, then they understand. And the transport was actually pretty simple. So the rocket was not in one piece. It's called different modules. So we have sections of the rocket that can be disassembled easily, and then we pack them in regular wooden boxes and we put them in container. It was a 20-foot container, so standard, good transport, and it was really easy to do the transport here.
So and then you traveled all the way to Australia with one ship, or I mean, there was this issue on the Suez Canal and so, but did you went via South
Yeah,
Africa? Or?
that's why it took a little bit longer than 2 months. Normally, it should be even possible to get to Australia in 4 weeks with a container ship, but this year it took almost a bit more even than 2 months. Also, the ship had to be changed in Singapore, so the rocket was unloaded and loaded again in Singapore and then moved here to Australia, Adelaide. And from there on a regular truck here, the streets are very empty outside of the city, and it's an 8-hour drive for a private car, but probably around 10 hours for the truck from Adelaide to get here to the launch site.
Wow, that sounds totally crazy. No, fantastic. It sounds. Let's unpack your journey. So, how did you start to build rockets? What is your founder's background on that?
Yeah, so we are 4 founders who are actively managing the company today. We met all in a student group in 2012, so over 12 years ago, or almost 12 years ago now. Actually, one of our founders, Mario, he started already in 2006 with the student group. So he founded it, and the other 2 founders and we joined in 2012. And when Mario and some other students founded the group in 2006, they were looking for the safest possible propulsion system that they could test at a university. and they found hybrid propulsion systems. And hybrid propulsion means that it's a rocket engine that has a liquid phase and a solid phase. So the fuel is solid and the oxidizer is liquid. In a rocket, you always have to carry your oxidizer. So an air-breathing engine, which is what an aircraft has, or a helicopter, or a ship, or a car, an air-breathing engine will only take fuel or gas, and then you burn it with the oxygen from the air. But a rocket always needs also the oxygen on board, and there are several possibilities. You can use pure oxygen. That's what we're doing now. But as a student team, we used another liquid, which is called nitrous oxide, which is also rich in oxygen, but not only oxygen. And therefore, you have then a liquid oxidizer and a solid fuel. And the specialty, and that's why they choose it, is that this cannot explode, because I'm not sure, Torsten, if you ever have seen a candle explode. I have not. And the reason is because the candle is solid and the liquid is liquid. You cannot mix it, so it will only touch each other on the surface, and therefore an explosion is not possible. If you have two liquids, they can mix. If you have gases, they can mix. Or if you have even a solid propellant that's premixed, that is, for example, in New Year's Eve rockets, that then it can explode because it's already premixed, or it can mix quickly, and a hybrid rocket can never mix. And then they looked at the different types of fuels that they could use for a hybrid rocket, and they found that the traditional fuels that have been used in the past, in the literature, in let's say research that has been done starting in the 30s, these fuels were too slow burning, and therefore the engines were either not powerful enough, or they had very complex shapes and geometries. So they tried to improve the thrust by making it complex. But complexity is not what we wanted, or what the student team even back then wanted. They wanted simplicity and high performance. And so they found a study about liquefying fuels. And liquefy is a different word for melt. And so if you think of melting fuel, then you can come to the conclusion, oh, a candle wax is actually a melting fuel, so this should be used in a hybrid rocket. And the research then showed that this was exactly the right answer to create a hybrid rocket engine which was safe, but at the same time with extremely high performance. And so that's where the student group come together. In 2012, we met. We then improved the technology, built the first rockets. We launched a rocket in 2016, which set up a world record for students. And that was at the University of Stuttgart. And only last year, the University of Stuttgart broke our own record, building upon the same technology. So they have flown to 60 kilometers, and we back then flew to 30 kilometers. With incremental increase of the performance, they achieved this, which further shows how powerful this technology is, because it's cheap, safe, and still powerful. And then after our successful launch in 2016, we saw the opportunity to create a business to commercialize the technology, because there was a new trend in the space industry, which is called new space industry. And it's not only about launches, but a big thing in the new space industry was, of course, a new approach to developing launch vehicles commercially, like SpaceX or Rocket Lab did it back then already. While in Europe, when we started, no one talked about commercial development of rockets. Today, it's the number one topic in the launcher industry. And so we saw, okay, for a small launcher, a launch vehicle that can bring maybe 500 to 1,000 kilogram of satellites into space, the historically used technology is not suitable. It's too expensive. It's not scalable to the smaller size. It's scalable to the large sizes much better than to the small size. And we saw from our student team results from the rocket launches that our technology is very good in this small to medium-sized range of rockets. And so we decided to develop our own orbital launch vehicle with a 4 small satellites. And that's what we are currently doing. And since we had the experience that with the student rockets, that rocket launches are difficult, and it's not always only about the technology, it's also about processes with different players. It's about humans with stress and experience and all of that. So we decided that we need to again include also a suborbital launch into our development roadmap to train the team, to get more knowledge about the system, to get knowledge about the spaceports that we would be working with, and also in the end to convince investors and other people which are not as familiar with the technology as we are that it's actually working. Because in 2017, when we started to think about founding the company, we mostly got feedback as well, candle wax that can never work. This will not work. The performance is too low, or no one has done it ever in this size, so it's not working. And now this launch also this week will show that it's actually working. So for us, therefore, it's a really important milestone.
Let me come back to you, to your own development. Now we have an echo here. You studied rocket science. No, you studied aviation technology, or what was the study subject you chose?
Yeah, I studied in Stuttgart aerospace engineering.
Okay.
I started in 2008. I finished in 2013. I continued then, because I was also involved in the student group, I continued to do a PhD also at University of Stuttgart, and also the German Aerospace Center in Lampolitshausen, which is the biggest rocket engine test site in Europe. And I finished the PhD in 2019, so basically already after we have founded the company. So this was all a bit in parallel ongoing.
And your PhD was on that subject as well, I guess.
Yes, correct. So my PhD was actually not about launchers, although I squeezed them in a little bit, because the original topic was to check whether our propulsion solution could also be used for a lunar lander mission. And I was focusing a lot on the simulation and sizing of such a mission. And the result was that it could actually be worth to research and develop it, because again, our system is safe, but I also looked especially at the storability of this propellants, because the candle wax you can of course store, but then you need to combine it with an oxidizer that you can also store. And this was basically the comparisons that I did, different oxidizers and how that would work.
Okay. And your entire founders team, you talked about the 4 people. Does they have the same background, or are they coming from different areas?
We all have the same background from the student group. We also were, let's say, all engineers. And this is, of course, maybe one of the reasons why in the last 5 years our company was not as visible as others, because we were always very focused on the technology first, marketing second. This has now changed, of course. We have now this milestone of the launch, which we try to maximize our outreach. And so far it has been great, because this week was already a lot of reporting in German press, at least, and also in the Australian. And we are, of course, growing our team into the commercial areas as well now, although we have already a backlog for both orbital and suborbital rocket. If you currently have a rocket, you don't need any marketing. The customers will come to you, because all rockets are booked until 2027, whether it's in Europe or in the US. Small satellites don't find launch opportunities. And so it was actually a wise decision to focus mainly on the technology, because we should be there quickly, but also capital efficient. And we have only 60 employees. And so what we achieve with less than 60 employees is really significant, with the launch happening this week.
What was your motivation from you and the team? I mean, many of us, when we grow up, we want to be astronaut, we want to be animal doctor, or whatever it is. So it's somewhere in the development of at least young boy, potentially now also young girl, as they of course have the same opportunities. So what was the driver for your motivation? Was it fame, money, curiosity? So choose one of them, or many of them.
Well, of course, founding a company is a large endeavor, and making it a success commercially also and financially is a goal. But it was never like this that we founders sat together and said, okay, let's see how we can make a lot of money. That was never a discussion point. So we are inspired by rockets ourselves. We love to work on rockets, and now here being after 8 years since we launched the rocket the last time, being back here at the launch site is really the feeling why we are doing it, because this is so much fun, even if it's terribly exhausting and
Yeah,
and exciting, and you're really nervous, and you don't sleep well all the time, but that's really why we are doing it.
I see. But building rockets in Europe or in Germany in particular sounds like a super strange idea, not just about our history, but market environment and so on, regulation. Choose one of the challenges here. Why did you decide to stay in Europe? Because, I mean, this idea in the US would fly potentially in the literal sense.
Yes, on the one hand, you are right. On the other hand, we are, of course, also interested to bring Europe forward. I mean, I mentioned already that when we started, there was no discussion about new space. And now you can look in any country, and all they talk about is new space. And we're by far not the only company. There are two other launchers, and there are dozens of satellite companies who are also in the new space field, but we're one of them. And so this was a new trend that we wanted to bring also to Europe, to the new way of thinking, into the space industry. And so, yeah, you can go where it's easy, or you do it where you care about. And we care about Europe, we care about our Germany, where we live, where we're from, and we want to bring benefits here. And that's why we did not even think once about going to another country or the US in the first place. Now, of course, the market is global. So where we later launch and where our customers will come from and where we have a sales team, that will be, of course, still everywhere. And we have actually some of the first customers we signed for our first test flight of the orbital launcher are American companies, because they also need more launchers. And it's just a global market, with the exception of maybe China and Russia now, of course. Everything else is very global, and you see me now in Australia and not in Germany either, because here the space industry, especially in South Australia, is also something that is waking up to the new space trend. And new space basically means small entities can do space in a lean, flexible, agile manner, and not rely on government-driven and defined space programs that take 20 years to make a simple thing. And this is exciting times that we can today progress much faster than in the past on the development of rockets and also satellites. And yes, Germany is not the easiest country. We got now as HyImpulse actually more support from the United Kingdom than from Germany, if you just look at the numbers. That's why also we will grow in the United Kingdom faster than in Germany in the coming months, and we will launch most of our rockets in the United Kingdom and in Australia. We might also launch in the future from French Guiana. We are one of the companies to launch, to be selected for a possible launch site there. So we are not only German company, we are actually already multinational, and like I said, Germany could support the launcher industry more, but I think that's for a lot of industries currently true, that Germany could invest more, but has difficulties to do it.
Absolutely. And just for our Austrian bold community, there are a good number of Austrians running space companies even in Germany. So there are at least uh, about a handful, I would say, that I have in mind, but there might be even more. And just to second what you said on new space companies or the new space ecosystem, it's not youth research, it's not students teams per se. It is what Elon Musk showed what can happen if you bring a new idea to market and not rely per se on government funds and run it your own way. So and we see today new space companies that are in the market for 5 or 10 years and still called new space companies. So I think if you differentiate the old space, or even that is not a proper term, we talk about the government funds and military funded companies that building rockets or space systems and big satellites. So if you want to stay in this context, big rockets become big satellites, and smaller companies building smaller stuff and more agile. And as you said, I mean, could you imagine an Airbus build such a rocket with just 60 people? I mean, then they would need the 60 people for writing the documents potentially. But it's a different story. Let's coming back to your rocket. Let's talk a bit more tech. You mentioned the propulsion system that is unique. The rocket that you're launching now is an suborbital rocket, as you mentioned, as a first step to go orbital, because suborbital to place a satellite doesn't make sense because it will fall down. So can you talk a bit more technical details for our audience?
Yes, so a suborbital rocket is for us both a testing vehicle, a test ground to improve our technology, to actually minimize the risk of a failure of the first launch of the orbital vehicle, because we can already test almost all the systems in a smaller version on the suborbital rocket, especially the rocket engine, which is actually not even a smaller version. It's the same scale as we will test, as we will fly on the orbital launcher. We will then just bundle it together. So we basically, the suborbital rocket is now built out of a hybrid rocket motor, which has the candle wax inside. It's about 350 kilogram of paraffin, and then carbon composite casing, and of course some parts like the nozzle and the injectors, which bring then the liquid oxygen inside. The injectors are connected to the oxygen tank, which is also an innovative new solution. It's the first European composite tank for liquid oxygen that flies, which has no metal liner inside. So also innovation from our own development together with partner companies. And on top of the oxygen tank is a helium tank, which is housing the helium, which is used to push the oxygen into the engine. And above the helium tank, we have a parachute recovery system to recover the whole rocket so that it's reusable in the future. In the first launch, we don't really know if it will be already reusable. It's part of the data that we want to gain out of this launch, to see how the rocket looks after the launch and what parts can be reused and which parts might not be reusable. And then on top of that, there's the avionics, which basically measures and controls everything and also sends down data to the ground so that we know where the rocket is and where we can find it for the recovery. And above the avionics, we have a payload. Currently, the payload on this first flight is for kids, where we have gathered their postcards and we'll hand them out. Some of the kids might be teenagers by now because we gathered them already 3 years ago, but nevertheless, they will be still happy to receive them back. And of course, in a commercial launch, like we plan soon to follow up then the first launch, there will be above the avionics, there will be also the customer payload, a real experiment, let's say, that can be, for example, microgravity research, for physics, for material science, for pharma industry, for biology. It can also be a telescope, which NASA often does, telescope missions on suborbital rockets, or it can be some technology demonstration if someone wants to test a new spacecraft or a new flying vehicle and they don't want to do it immediately in the full mission, they can do it on a suborbital mission.
So how long will be this mission just in time for these kind of payloads, as you mentioned, from the separation to dropping down?
On the first flight, we are flying to around 60 kilometers. This was a limit that we got for a first flight from the launch site and the regulator. And this is actually the same in the UK and in Australia. So we designed the rocket for 60 kilometers. And I think the mission will take around 10 minutes. In the future, this rocket will fly to up to 200 kilometers and then will generate 10 minutes of microgravity, and the total flight will take about 20 minutes until the rocket touches down again on ground. And that's, of course, much shorter than an orbital launch. If we then have our orbital launch vehicle, which has actually 3 stages, so it's actually 3 rockets stacked on each other, and the first stage has 8 engines, the second stage 2, and the third stage has 1 engine. So it's all the same engines like we use on that suborbital rocket this week. This orbital rocket will take around 90 minutes until it has deployed the satellites, and then will return to the Earth surface and re-enter.
Interesting. You mentioned the demand earlier on, and it seems for me that rocket companies like yours are the poster boys for investors right now. So are you looking for new partners and new investors in the current stage, or are you happy?
Yes. Yes, of course. No, rocket development is very capital intensive. We have been very capital efficient, so actually we have only 1 seed investor until now. We're still in the seed phase, and it's incredible that with just seed funding, we have reached already a launch now in Australia. That's very uncommon, I would say. And we are, of course, raising then the Series A after the launch, because this is a key milestone for us, after which we can continue and accelerate the development. So right now we have a lot of plans in our shelves where we want to start execution immediately after we come back to Germany. And for that, we want to close the Series A funding soon.
Okay. So can you talk about the challenges that you had to pass on your way? I mean, money will be obviously one of them, as you mentioned, very cost efficient, but still money, I think, is always tight. But what about human resources? Are these available for you? What about the legal issue? I mean, Germany is a launching state without having a space law might be some challenging. What about insurance and all of that things that coming after that? So can you talk about, or would you like to talk about the challenges?
Yes. So if I look backwards, then the big challenge was to get this engine where we are now. Here we have a much larger challenge than most of our competitors in the field, because we are really doing a propulsion system that no one else in the world has. So we could not open a book and check how it's done, or call some experienced guys who are retired to tell us how to do it, or go to a supplier and say, build us a part of the engine. We had to really develop it completely from scratch. And that was the biggest risk, I would say, when we started the company, whether that would even work out with such a big candle, which no one could tell us if maybe it will break all the time apart, because it's so it's not an easy material to handle, and we had to find the right ingredients to make it work. And the same for the stability of the engine. Will we get it stable, that the thrust is nice and smooth, and the satellite would not be falling apart because of the vibrations? All of that is solved, and we are on a good way to solve to get to the orbital launch now. So in the past 5 years, I would say the biggest challenge was always on the technical side, because there were some uncertainties. Now it's different, because this launch will, well, we already know that it works, because we can, as engineers, see the different systems on ground and say, okay, if we put them now together, there's no reason why it should not work. But of course, if you do it, then actually there can be still mistakes that you need to improve further. So for us now, also the launch is liftoff. Everything that comes after and is successful is a bonus. We know that the launch might have some mistakes and some partial failures inside, If not, it would be surprising. If everything works 100%, that would be a surprise, and we would celebrate it. But it's not. It's not how a first launch usually goes. But for the future, I see the challenges in different areas, and you mentioned some of them actually. So funding is one of the biggest issues. Although it's an interesting investment for space investors in Europe, we lack the large hardware deep tech investment community that other countries like the US, but also Asia has, and this is an issue. On the other hand, we are so capital efficient that we will manage with much less money than our competitors. So we are raising only around 100 million to go to space. This is some others put this all in their factory. Let's say we don't need that. And the second point, you are right. We have an incredible team of 60 employees, but it's hard to grow it further and further because the market for propulsion and aerospace engineers with experience in space is in Europe very limited. There are many companies now who want to hire these persons, so this is one challenge. To grow basically also the company then fast enough with the talent that we have. We have 60 nations already, so we're looking worldwide to bring the best engineers to Germany or our sites in the UK, in Glasgow. And then other than that, it's actually, we have a business risk. Like any company, does the market really develop as predicted? Will our cost be competitive and so on? But to be honest, I think for me personally, I'm 100% convinced that it will be like this because I see the numbers already, what our development cost until now, what our product cost until now. It's so cheap that no one will be able to compete and be profitable. And so for me, the only risk really is can we raise the funding and can we find all the talent quickly enough to go to space? Everything else to me, can we build a rocket? Yes, absolutely. Can we launch to space? Yes, absolutely. We can do it all in-house, or we can use the whole European supply chain. It's there. The know-how how to build a rocket is there in Europe. It's not a problem. And so the funds financing, and then the how quickly we can hire all the talent that's needed, that's the biggest two risks. And so I'm not really scared about the technology or the market. Is really the predictions get better and better every year for the market. So
Indeed.
indeed.
I sensed you didn't want to talk about the legal and the regulatory aspect, and I
The legal, no, the legal. Yeah, I forgot it.
Go ahead.
Actually, I think it's difficult, but it's not impossible because we are flexible to where we launch from. Germany has no space law, so actually right now it's good for us because we don't have to care about what Germany thinks about our launch here in Australia. There is the agreement between nations. So Australia has a licensing and a regulation, and so Germany will. So if something would happen, then they have to talk to Germany and we'll sort it out. In the UK, it's the same. And if the regulation in one country would be bad, there is quite some more nations where we can go to. So as long as we are able to move from one country to another for the launch, I don't see a problem. Actually, in UK and Australia, the regulation is very good now. We are happy with that. And in Germany, like I said, we're not launching there anyway. So it does not matter too much for us.
Okay. We are almost over time. So, but two quick questions. So you talked about the payload, the clients that are piling up. Two questions in that. How can the Bolt community, which also might be interested in connecting with you, for payload or best case as an investor, get in touch with you? And what are the clients you are looking for?
Well, you can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. We especially post now regularly about our launch campaign, so you should follow us there. Or you send me an email to my email address. And the customers are small satellite operators. There are many different fields of where they use their small satellites. The most exciting applications are, of course, communication, to get free access to the internet and to free communication from space, so that no one can censor or manipulate it. We see how crucial that is also for sovereign aspects of a country, like in the Ukraine war, where Elon Musk plays a role as a private person, basically. The other exciting fields are Earth observation. We can improve the harvest of crops because we know better where we need to put fertilizer and water and all of that. We can see where the forests are burning. We can see where there's flooding, and we can understand all the climate change effects much better if we have data from space. So there are many exciting fields, and we could fill another hour about what our customers are doing. But actually, they might know better, and so you should invite them next time.
Absolutely. What are your next steps now after the campaign? Collecting data, collecting the rocket, coming back to Germany?
Yes, we will collect the rocket, analyze the data, also debrief with the launch site and the regulator. For them, it's also the first launch like this. And then we go back, and we have so many projects to work on, and hopefully some of the team also get the well-deserved holiday.
Okay, thank you very much, Christian. So, Caro, back to you.
Thank you so much. I don't think I just speak for myself, but I think for most of us, the last 40 minutes has been very, very interesting. I think we covered a lot of topics within the topic of European rockets in space. So thank you very, very much. With that being said, I would really like to open the floor. Does anybody have any questions that you would like to directly ask these two gentlemen? You guys can write it in the chat. And there's also Q&A.
Q&A, you can put it.
Maybe in the meantime, Christian can talk about the launch site, because what is very interesting in equatorial space launch is that it's an Aboriginal run community that is doing that. So, and I saw these pictures on LinkedIn that there was a video preparing your food, and so I mean that looks like a holiday destination at the end.
It looks like an adventure, and that it is. So we learn so much also about here the culture in Australia, and it's really fascinating how these Aborigines community want to contribute. They are living here on the countryside. They don't have many jobs. It's very difficult life for them actually, and space can bring benefits to them. Not only because they profit from the data that we could generate from space, but also because they can really create jobs here with these activities and a future for their children. So there was also school classes coming and touching the rocket, which also is only possible because it's a candle wax rocket. And that's very inspiring. And it's, of course, also part of, I mean, we also work in this field because we are so inspired by the technology, by what humans can achieve, really. And so it's nice to see that also these people who until now did not really have a connection to space, which is very far from them, how they are fascinated by it. And the launch site is actually land leased by the Kuniba community. So they are part of the organization. We could not do it without them, and it's really fun to work with this spaceport team from Southern Launch and with the community. It's really a great experience.
Thank you. So there's a question.
Yes, there's a question who just came in. Well, two questions now, or really three questions. So Benjamin asked that he recently read that the number of annual satellites launched has risen from 230 or so lately, but should rise to about 1,000 or more every year by the year 2030. How do you see that, and if you think it's realistic?
Yes, it's absolutely realistic. from my perspective, because we are just at the beginning, and a lot of our customers are also at the beginning. So this means it's a chicken and egg problem a bit. There are no launchers, therefore you cannot launch easily satellites, and you need the satellites to have a good business case to develop the launchers. And once the launchers are there, then there will be many more people who will say, okay, now there is launch opportunity and it's getting cheaper, so now I can realize my idea. So I think we will see much more different applications, and then the applications also get more massive. So you will have larger constellations. So until now, maybe a university launched only one satellite. Suddenly they will start launching 10 satellites or 20, and they can do it because the technology gets cheaper and more affordable, and this will happen all around the world. And so I think these predictions, which say thousands of satellites will be launched in a few years per year, they will become true.
Just on a clarification here, it's not the number of satellites that rose to 230. These are the actual launches that we have seen in the last year, not satellites. And if you take an Starlink launch, they launch about 50 satellites per launch. So the 1,000+ satellites are absolute correct, and we see that more and more. In a report that will be released on Thursday, Slingshot Aerospace will mention 12,000 satellites in space right now already. So with all these problems that coming are to that, which we don't want to discuss here, but we see these big constellations, and Christian just mentioned that in Europe, it's not just IRIS, it is very realistic Rivada Space, which will start their launches next year. And they talk about 600 satellites and 300 at the first attempt in 2 years, I think 2026, if I'm not mistaken. Unseen Lab just grew from 12 Bro nano satellites to announcement today of 60 satellites in the 150 kilogram class. So these are just European companies, and we can be very proud of that. Also Austria has satellites in space. So with Adler 1 and Adler 2, at least.
I actually have a question, which is, I think a very big topic in Europe or in the world right now is sustainability. And so for me, my question would be, how does Europe address sustainability and kind of like environmental concerns when it comes to rockets?
First of all, rockets sound big, and they are certainly big, and especially the big rockets are very big, but the total space industry, let's say, emissions are relatively small if you compare it with any other industry. So it's not the highest priority. I would recommend any government to focus on reducing the space industry CO2 emissions, or especially the rockets. They should then focus on the power mix, because we need a lot of power to produce rockets and satellites and to operate the ground stations and all of that. So we're actually more depending on how clean is the power that comes out the wall than what kind of propellants do we burn. But all of the rockets that are currently developed in Europe have an approach on sustainable fuels, which means that they are planning in the medium or long term to become carbon neutral. And for us, that's also true. We are already working with a company who can produce synthetic paraffin, which is basically produced from carbon capture. So you take carbon CO2 out of the air, you use renewable energy, and you create together with water a new paraffin molecule, and then you can create the paraffin fuel that we need. And you can do that with different fuels like kerosene as well. So there we actually profit also from the same interest as the aviation industry, because they're also working on that. And so we can become carbon. But like I said already, compared to the aviation industry, for example, rocket emissions are almost zero. So sustainability on that regard, it will be done, but it's nothing that will change, let's say, the world, if not other industries do much more. The other part is, of course, what Torsten already mentioned. It's about um, the the debris in orbit that could become an issue if we have more and more satellites. For us specifically, we're launching into low Earth orbit where the atmosphere is still there, which means if we stop launching, then after 25 years, these orbits are again clean. So as long as we don't fly too high, we are actually having a continuous cleaning of the orbit. But for higher altitudes, it's something that needs also to be addressed, and the space industry is working on it. There are ESA missions to capture old satellites and to clean some debris, and there are also companies to track all the debris, so that in the future, when the technology has progressed more, we will find ways to remove them from the orbit.
And I think I want to jump in on the ESA side, as you mentioned, the zero debris charter that just recently went out, that ESA said very clear, everything we put as ESA into space has to come down. It will not remain in space. And I think that's a first thing, to have an agreement of preventing debris or dead satellites when they are not used today. So, and then it's a very hot topic in the industry, definitely.
Thank you. But sorry, just a follow-up question. Are there such things as then like reusable rockets if it's not about emissions, but like?
Yeah, but the main purpose there is to lower the cost, to reuse parts as much as possible is the best way to try further. So the first thing to reduce cost is to choose the cheap technology. That's what we are doing with the candle wax fuel. But the second part then is to even reuse it. Then you can lower the cost even further. And of course, yeah, you need less energy than to produce the rockets, so it's also a bit greener. That's true.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think there are more questions that came in whilst you were answering. Someone asked, can you elaborate a bit more on what role European, Austrian companies could play in the global space industry?
We are already playing a big role. So we, as the European space industry, of course, we are not in volume, let's say, playing the same role. So if you look at rocket launches, for example, then it's embarrassing. We had almost no rocket launch, whilst the US has had much more than 100 launches. And so we need to increase that. We need to increase our ambitions. And it's good to see that there are so many startups like us who want to do that. We need to spend more on space. We need to explain to our citizens how important space is, because a lot of citizens don't understand it, that it's important and why they need it. Although they're already relying on it every day. And not just in the navigation, also in other fields where they maybe don't even know about it. Like maybe their food was produced with data from space, so the farmers had access to space and therefore could produce better food or more food. And so space is really also a question of sovereignty as a continent and as a country. So it needs to be more important, and then we can also play a role. But of course, we have a lot to catch up, and actually, the distance is growing still. It's not shrinking; it's growing, and we have to work on that.
The next question is, are there any European companies or startups that could become the European SpaceX? Any with a similar ambition or scope? I've heard of ESA Aerospace. Are they a promising player?
So actually, many launcher companies, us included, are working on plans for after their rocket launch. There's a lot of talk. That's why we launch and want to show action. Why we focus first on the things that we're doing now. That's actually what Elon Musk did also in the beginning. He launched first his small rocket a few times until it worked, and then he continued bigger. And we have to show as a new space industry that we're not just talking, but also doing things, especially in the launcher field. In other fields, it's already proven. But there will be companies who will try that. And what we have to make sure in Europe is that they will not go the same path like our past big industry players, which is a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of process, slow movement, like Torsten already mentioned. But then we can have these big players again. But in the end, it depends also on the will of the government to how much to invest into the space industry, because in the end, one of the main customers of space industry is government and its different applications in the government side.
If I might answer the question here, we have at the moment in Europe about 20 companies that working on launchers. This number are fluctuating, but and many of them, at least 10 of them, are out there for the last 5 years. So they moved from the PowerPoint phase to real hardware in different launch statuses. And ESA Aerospace is one of them. ESA Aerospace is a very promising one. I had the pleasure to visit Andoya Spaceport, where they launched where they're about to launch their rocket from in northern Norway. We have in Germany also RFA, Rocket Factory Augsburg. These are the 3 German ones. Then we have PLD in Spain, which had their first suborbital rocket launched, I think, 3 months ago, if I'm not mistaken. Then we have Orbix, Skyrover in the UK, and so on and so forth. France is now picking up on that with Maya, with Latitude, with a lot of government money into that as well. So there is a development which is good, and it's also from an outside perspective, competition is good. Competition drives innovation, and that's what we see in this sector. And I know we are now over time already.
Which is good. I mean, it's good, and yes, I'm going to have to close this space, but it's good because I think there's a lot of good stuff here. So with that being said, thank you very much. I think it was very, very interesting. Thank you for answering all of our questions. I thought it was very, very interesting. And yeah. So thank you very much. And actually, for all of our listeners, I have an announcement, which is we're already able to tell you what our next Bold Talk is going to be about. So if you are interested, also Torsten and Christian, you're more than welcome to join. But our next Bold Talk will actually happen in the next 2 weeks. We'll be joined by 2 amazing ladies, the head of representative female immersive tech leader in the UK, as well as the representative for Austria. They will be joining forces and hosting our next Bold Talk about what it's like to have to be a woman in tech and a leader in terms of the immersive tech scene. So feel free to join us for that. They will also be joined with actually a young girl. So it will be them as well as I think a 14-year-old girl they mentioned, who will be joining them for that talk to talk about what it's like to be a woman in tech, if that's what your aspirations are. How does it feel like as well to be in leadership in a male-dominant sector? So we're very, very excited for that, and stay tuned on Bold Digital. If you guys want to stay connected, please check out our digital home at digital.boldcommunity.org, where you have more access to the output of this call. So for those who will watch the live later, we actually have or will prepare different snippets, different types of content based on this. We also have a lot of content based on space as well for the people in our community who are working on the matter. So with that being said, I would like to thank all of you for taking the time listening to us, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much, for having us. And
good night.
Good night, Christian. For those of you that really now got some flavor about space, in the next 46 hours, we have our next Space Cafe Geopolitics on nukes in space, which is a very topical issue because it happened last week at the UN Security Council, where Russia voted against that, not against nukes in space, but for preventing nukes in space, what is a very, very, very concerning issue at the UN level. And I'm having one of the world experts on that topic with me, Dr. Jessica West, and you are highly invited to join us. And if you want to know more about space, look at SpaceWatch.Global. There's everything you need to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Happy Labor Day tomorrow.
Happy Labor Day.
Thank you.
Christian, good luck, Christian.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Ciao.